War is hell. It reaches every hand, from the soldier in the trench to the nurse at his side, from the engineer forging weapons to the families left behind. These are their stories. This is World War I Stories, Tales Beyond the Trenches. Today's episode, They Carried It With Them. "Don't touch that, Julian. It's hot." "I was not going to touch it, grandfather," the 13-year-old lied. He slowly withdrew his hand. He had been in his grandfather's candy shop hundreds, if not thousands of times. But this was the first time he had been allowed anywhere near the large copper pot that grandfather used to make his sweets. "Why is the bottom of the pot round, grandfather?" the curious boy asked. "Ah, a good question, Julian. You've got an eye for detail." He smiled, tapping the rim of the pot with his spoon. "It's rounded so the heat spreads evenly. That way, every grain of sugar melts together, no one part burning before the next." "Can I put the sugar in now?" "Soon, Julian. Very soon. The pot is almost ready." He glanced around the shop. "Fetch that stool over there. You'll need it to see properly once the sugar goes in. You'll need to watch closely and pay attention to the smell." Julian did as he was told. He knew he was learning from a master. His grandfather, Alphonse, had been making candy for 50 years. He had begun in his own kitchen, shaping small pralines of almonds and caramel and selling them to the neighborhood families. In time, he had saved enough to open his own shop, and that was where they were now. He pushed the stool into position and stepped on top of it. Now he was tall enough to see into the large pot. He looked on as his grandfather took a small spoon, dipped it into a bucket of water nearby, and proceeded to drip water into the pot. "See the water dance, Julian?" "Yes, sir." "If the pot was too cold, the water would just sit there and steam. If it was too hot, the water would immediately disappear. When the water dances, the temperature is perfect." Grandfather smiled at him. "Now we can add the sugar." Excitedly, Julian hopped off the stool to retrieve the sack of sugar he had been eyeing since he first entered the shop an hour ago. The sack was made of burlap and was heavy. Julian attempted to lift it but could not. Instead, he dragged it to the cooking station and watched his grandfather cut it open with a knife. He returned to the stool, and as grandfather lifted the bag to pour, Julian reached to help. He grabbed at the sack, and even though he was not really helping, he felt good. "That's enough, Julian," grandfather said after a few moments as he pulled the bag back and placed it back on the shop floor. "Now, I want you to grab that long spoon over there and start stirring. We need to make sure it melts evenly and doesn't burn, so move quickly." He did as he was told and now stood on the stool stirring the sugar, being careful not to get close enough to touch the hot pot. "Not so fast, Julian. Nice and slow," grandfather instructed. "Now stop, remove the spoon, count to 5, and stir slow again." Julian listened to his grandfather's instructions for a few minutes and noticed the sugar changing colors. "It's turning gold. I think it's ready, grandfather," he said excitedly. Grandfather laughed. "Not quite yet. We needed a beautiful amber color. But keep watching. If it starts to turn brown, then we'll have to start over." "Oh, okay." It took another minute of off and on stirring before grandfather told him to stop and moved him off the stool. He slid the stool out of the way, then, using pieces he had cut from another burlap sack, gripped the handles of the pot and lifted it from the heat, setting it carefully on a nearby table. "Bring the stool back over and look at the color, Julian. This is the color you want." Julian again did as he was told. He was amazed at the transformation of the sugar. Next, grandfather added a jug of cream. The sugar hissed, foamed, and steamed loudly as he did. Next, butter was added. The butter had already been cut into small cubes for faster melting. Julian stirred with the same large spoon he had used earlier. Next, we add some salt and a dash of mint. This was Grandfather's signature flavor, a rich, creamy caramel with a light, minty aftertaste. It was a favorite of those in the neighborhood who frequented his shop. He stirred for another 2 minutes, his grandfather looking on studiously. Finally, his grandfather took the spoon from his hands and removed it from the bowl. It is time. Julian had seen this part many times before. Instinctively, he jumped off the stool and pushed it out of the way. Grandfather reached for the folded pieces of burlap and wrapped them around the handles of the pot. The copper gleamed, still hot from the flame. Moving with care, he lifted the pot and crossed the room to the marble slab. The surface had already been brushed with butter, and a square metal frame was in place to keep the caramel from spilling over the edge and onto the floor. Once poured, Julian crossed over to look. It was perfect, and he had helped. He felt so proud. A voice from behind him emerged. "Julian, are you down here?" It was Mother. She had come downstairs from the apartment over the shop that the family shared. "I'm here, Mama, helping Grandfather," he answered back. He watched as his mother crossed the shop from the door that led upstairs to the apartment. "What are we making?" she asked. "Grandfather's signature caramel," he responded. She hugged her father affectionately. "Good morning, Lucy. I trust you slept well." "I did, Father. Thank you." She turned again to Julian. "Would you two like some breakfast?" Julian looked up at his grandfather, who replied, "Of course we would. Come, Julian, let's allow this to cool while we eat. Then we cut it." With that, they left the shop and went upstairs for breakfast. Julian had been working hard that morning, at least for him. For Grandfather, it was a normal day. It was now midday, and he was out in the street playing football with his friends. They had set up 2 wooden boxes that served as 2 small goals at either end of their playing area in the street. These were easily movable if a carriage or motor car came rumbling down the street. There were 10 children in all, 5 on each team, and Julian was chasing down his friend Pierre, who was deftly kicking the ball with his left foot to his right as he made his way towards the goal that would give Julian's team the loss. Pierre's younger brother Lucien stood before the goal ready to defend it. Pierre faked left, and Lucien lunged. Then Pierre went right, and before Julian could get there, the ball had gone in. Game over. A large cheer went up down the street. Were people watching them? Julian asked himself. He glanced around and realized he was not the only one wondering. All 10 of them stood motionless, and eventually looked toward the source of the noise. "That sounds like the train station," Lucien said quietly. "It does," added Pierre. Knowing that Julian's father worked as a railway foreman, they all looked in his direction. He knew they wanted to go check out the goings-on, but waited for his say-so. He did not know why. They didn't need his permission. Without a word, he led the way. As they got closer, they heard military music. There was a band. What they saw when they arrived at the station was mesmerizing. There were people everywhere, most dressed in military uniform. There was a brass band playing near the station house under a banner that resembled the French flag. It seemed that all of Paris was here. But why? Across the platform, he could see his father, Roland. He stood, clipboard in hand, monitoring something. What it was, Julian did not know. A man in an officer's uniform emerged next to his father on the platform. Julian looked on as he watched his father grab a crate and place it bottom up in front of the officer. The officer stood on the crate and blew a whistle. The cheering and loud banter stopped instantly, and everyone turned their attention to him. "It is time to board. Say your final goodbyes. I want single file lines to your assigned cars." He took a moment, then raised his fist in the air. "Next stop, Belgium, to face the Huns." The crowd again burst into cheers, and after a few more hugs and goodbyes, the soldiers separated and made their way to their assigned cars. From behind him, Julian can hear Lucian ask, "What's a Hun?" Nobody answered, probably because none of them had heard the term before. Instead, they watched as the soldiers boarded the train to the cheers of the crowd on the platform. Julian could still see his father, standing stoically near the door to the station house, clipboard in hand, using a pencil to check something off. Occasionally, he would see his father call another over, give an order, and then resume his paperwork. It was then that his father looked up and in his direction. Catching Julian's eye, he motioned for him to come. Julian started towards his father. His friends all followed. "What is it, father?" he asked as he approached. "Just stay here with me, all of you. I don't want any of you to get lost in this crowd or get hurt." The non-answer told Julian everything he needed to know. His father would explain it to him, but not in front of the other children. It was their parents' duty to tell them. It took half an hour for the platform to empty of uniforms and for the train to slowly start to pull from the station. Those left on the platform were no longer cheering. Some were crying. It was eerily quiet. With the train gone, people started to disperse. It took another 15 minutes for the platform to empty altogether. Julian saw his father look down at him. "Let's get you boys home." The walk home was quiet and seemed to take longer than the walk to the station. When they returned to the neighborhood, the children went to their respective homes, and Julian followed his father into the shop. His mother was still in the shop conversing with grandfather when they walked in. He watched his father walk towards his mother and hug her. Then he whispered something to her that Julian could not make out. His mother disappeared upstairs. She returned moments later with his sister Claire. Claire was 16 and training to become a nurse, but today she was home with her family. Julian adored his sister. His father cleared his throat, diverting Julian's attention back to him. He began talking mostly to Julian. 2 months ago, the Archduke of Austria was assassinated in Sarajevo. He looked at Claire. "I know you've heard all of this, Claire, but I want you here as we tell your brother." She nodded in agreement. "Son, that assassination set off a chain of events that started a war. What you saw today was a bunch of boys, some not much older than your sister, leaving Paris to fight." He had understood what he had seen. He had not understood why it had occurred, however, and this explanation helped. "What's a Hun, father?" he asked. "A Hun is what we call a German. They marched into Belgium, and many believe they intend to try and take Paris." "But why would they do that?" It was his grandfather who answered. "Because that's war." The routine continued the next day. Julian woke early to help his grandfather make caramel and pecan pralines. Later in the day, he was again out playing with friends when the noise from the station started up again. This time, however, he left the game and went into the shop where his sister was talking to grandfather. "Grandfather, is it okay if I take some caramel to the station to give to the men as they board the train?" His grandfather stood there in thought for a moment. "That's a splendid idea," Claire added. "Grandfather, I will go with him. Make sure he doesn't get hurt or lost." "I'm more worried about his getting on the train." They laughed at this gentle jibe. "Take that bag over there." He pointed at a bag against the wall that Julian knew was filled with his signature minty caramel. "Thank you, grandfather," he said, and gave him a hug. Claire had grabbed the bag of confections and they left the shop. Julian yelled towards his friends, "Hey guys, let's go hand out candy to the soldiers." "Great, that gives me 9 more kids to watch," she said under her breath. But then louder she said, "If you are to come, you're to stay with me. 2 candies per soldier. Do not get on the train. If I call you back, then you must listen. Do not forget, I know your parents." She looked at Pierre. "I'm looking at you, Pierre." Everyone giggled at Pierre being called out. The station was again abuzz with activity, but it was a little more subdued than the day before. The brass band still played, his father still stood clipboard in hand, and an officer still stood nearby. Julian noticed that the soldiers were in a single file line near the train, but the doors had yet to be opened on the cars. "They're already lined up. We have to hurry." Each child shoved their hand into the bag and ran towards the line of soldiers, Julian leading the way. He reached the front of the line just as the doors were being opened and quickly shoved 2 candies into the first soldier's hand. Confused, the soldier looked down. "What's this?" "It's candy. It's for you." And Julian moved on to the next man. He ran out of candies quickly, but thankfully Claire had been watching and quickly came to refill him and the other boys as they made their way down the line of soldiers. After an hour, the candy and the train were long gone. The platform was empty. His father approached. "What was that?" he asked. "It's war, father," Claire responded. "Many of those men won't be coming home." It was Julian that spoke next. "So we gave them a little piece of home to take with them." It was close to midnight. Their 20th batch of caramel cooled on the marble slab as Julian wrapped the last batch in paper, along with his sister, mother, and grandfather. After the scene at the station, his father and sister had gone out in the neighborhood to collect donations, either supplies from others in the artisan neighborhood or money to buy supplies. The shop made money, but they were giving product away for free. They wished to alleviate some pressure off of grandfather's shoulders. They had collected enough to make these 20 batches. They had worked through the night and were tired. It was 1 in the morning before they finished wrapping the final batch and made their way upstairs to sleep. The morning came, and this time they aimed to be there even earlier, perhaps before any soldiers with their families showed to the platform. They quickly ate a breakfast of strawberry crepes and oranges, met the other children downstairs, handed out bags, and made their way into the dawn light towards the station. They were surprised to see activity when they arrived. All except Claire. She seemed to expect it, Julian thought to himself. There were no soldiers, but others were milling about. One person held a stack of what looked to be postcards. 3 others had brought carts, and those carts were stocked with fruit and even fresh bread that he could smell in the air. When people saw Julian, Claire, and the other kids, they got quiet. The man with the postcards put them on the ground. Another, who had a bushel of apples, placed his basket on the ground. 2 others stepped away from their carts. One woman started a slow clap, and soon others joined in. Julian didn't know what to think of this. Why were they clapping? Were they clapping at them? It was his sister who answered. "They're clapping for you, little brother. They know that handing the boys a gift at the train was your idea. Father and I told them." He smiled, and his skin turned red in embarrassed pride. She continued, "As you can see, you made them want to give gifts too." Across the platform, Julian saw his father, his clipboard squeezed in his armpit. There was both pride and tears in his eyes as he too clapped. It had been the busiest 3 weeks of Julian's young life. Each night staying up late, and each morning waking before the sun to spend hours at the station, thanking and giving candy to departing troops. His father, being the railway foreman, had been insightful. He was able to learn which days and times the troops would depart. Usually, There were 2 trains a day, but sometimes only one. Julian had thought that they would have to rely on donations to continue their effort, but that was not the case. Instead, more and more people from around Paris started to come to the family shop. Some came as far as Montmartre, 5 kilometers away. Now, however, there would be no daily trains. They would still depart, but probably just once a week with replacement soldiers. For now, the trains were logistical, taking supplies according to his father. Life went on for Julian and his family. He would wake each morning and learn more and more of the candy trade from his grandfather. He would play with his friends in the afternoon, and when replacement troops were due at the station, he and his friends still met them to let them leave with a small taste of home. He missed Claire, though. She had finished her schooling and was now a nurse somewhere near the front. He worried for her every day. The months rolled past, then a year, then another year. The war rolled on. Julian was 15 now, and control of the candy shop was in the hands of his mother, but slowly following to him. Grandfather was too ill in his old age to continue. He stood in the shop with his mother as she poured fresh caramel over almonds to make pralines. "Mother, what if I were to serve?" "I don't wish to think of that. It's bad enough I worry for your sister." She stopped what she was doing. "Besides, you're too young." "Pierre has gone," he reminded her. She sighed. "I am aware of that, but you aren't faking your age like he did, and you certainly will not end as he did," she said calmly. Pierre had indeed faked his age. He had been sent to the front lines but faltered when faced with his first battle. Instead of going over the top, he had run the other way, paralyzed with fear and in tears. The army saw his panic as desertion, and for that he had been executed. "What if the war is not over in 2 years when I am of age? What if they conscript me?" he asked. "We will cross that bridge when we come to it. Now, please, wrap those hard candies like I told you to do." "Yes, Mama." The small bell rang as the door to the candy shop opened. Julian, now 17, looked up from his task of stirring the caramel to see a man in the blue uniform of the French soldier. "I'll be right there, sir. If I step away, the batch can burn." "I can wait," said the soldier. He stirred and monitored the color just as he had been taught by his late grandfather, who had passed from old age a year ago. When the caramel reached the desired color, he grabbed the folded burlap sacks and moved the pot off of the fire. The soldier looked on as he poured in the cream, the chopped butter, the mint, and some orange zest which had become his own signature flavor. Once he had poured the caramel on the prepared table, he turned his attention to the man at the counter. "Sorry for making you wait. What can I do for you?" he asked. "No problem," the soldier replied. "Watching you do that was actually quite fascinating. My grandfather taught me all I know. Sadly, he's no longer with us." "I'm sorry for your loss." From the look on his face, the soldier's gesture was sincere. "Thank you." A silence filled the room as Julian waited for the soldier to place an order of some kind. Instead, the man just stood there looking at him. Finally, the soldier spoke. "I'm not here to buy anything. I'm here to say thank you." "Thank me? What for?" Julian was genuinely curious and confused. "The day I left here 4 years ago, I was scared and lonely. My family isn't from Paris. There was nobody to see me off." Julian could see a tear form in the man's eye as he continued. "But you showed up. Not only did you say thank you to me and everyone else, you handed me this." The man reached into his pocket and brought out a small, wrapped piece of candy. The wrapper was no longer white. It was dirty and stained. and it was also no longer perfect square. You never ate it? Juliet asked. I ate one. It was delicious, the soldier responded. But I felt if I ate both, then I would have nothing to remind me of France, of Paris, and the kindness you and those other children showed us. Embarrassed now, his cheeks felt hot. It was really nothing. We just wanted to give something back. That's where you're wrong. What you did was not nothing. It meant everything. He paused, wiping the tears from his eye. It meant everything to me and to every other man that got on that train that day. My best friend Louis ate his last piece just before we went over the top for the first time. That must have been scary, Julian quipped. It was. It was the scariest moment I ever had. Louis never came back that day. We had to leave him in no man's land where he fell. I like to think he was comforted in his final moments by the aftertaste of the caramel and the mint. A soft apology was all Julian could muster as a lump of emotion caught in his throat. Would you like a bag of caramel? I won't make you pay for it. It seems you and others already have. The soldier looked at him, tears flowing down his cheeks. Actually, I would just like a hug. You've been listening to World War I Stories, Tales Beyond the Trenches, where history comes alive through the lives of those who lived it. If this episode moved you, please share it, follow, and leave a rating. Help keep these stories alive. Want to hold these stories in your hand? Explore the books inspired by them, available now on Kindle and in paperback.